I'll tell you when. I am now recording.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for your patience and for joining. And this lecture is kind of a follow-on to the last one about who is Audle Allison. And people had questions about what we are, or what is the kingdom of man. I showed some of the drawings, and I'll review some of that quickly, and then go into a little more of what Audley referred to as the kingdom of man. And I always stick kingdom of man or woman. Uh, Sometimes I do just the kingdom of woman, just to make sure that we're in a little better shape there. And then always I start with the 2 or 3 quotes, and I like to go through them because I think they're essential that people have some basis for what we're thinking. But seek truth in meditation, not in moldy books. Look into the sky to see the moon, not in the pond. And then there's 2 paths that Audley taught and kind of merged together because they were so complementary. The path of the Holy Nam, he talked about dedication, discipline, devotion, discrimination, and then meditation with the internal focus, becoming aware of the energy, listening to the sound current. And this quote here, a lot of times I like to go through it because he suggested when I first started that I read it every day, sometimes morning and night before I was going to sleep. But to walk in truth, I must be honest, courageous, and adaptable to my environment. Be brief, see and act with the issues of my environmental life condition. Try to always do a little more than is expected. Don't leave things undone that can be finished in the time given to each job. Review at the end of each day and clear your mind by forgiving and asking forgiveness when needed. Try not to make wild claims. And I have to watch that because they get excited. Be sensible and clear. And don't let the personality be too eager. Surrender to life's unfolding pattern set by the divine current. Feel it, follow it, be it. That was kind of his advice in the nutshell. And then Kriya Yoga, which we also study a lot with that. It signifies action, purification or sanctification, contemplation and study, meditation and prayer, cultivation of virtues, self-discipline, and then surrender to the self of a separate existence, dedication to God or surrender to the service. And then always, Audley said, don't believe a word I say. If you believe me, you'd believe any damn fool. And I like to start and honor his presence in every lecture that I do. And this is a picture I took many years ago. And then the kingdom of man and woman, there's some general discussions of what we are and maybe where you're from. And a lot of times people, they grow up and they're questioning like, who am I? Well, that's probably the wrong question to ask. It's more of what are you? Or and then Audley gave a lot of teaching that broke this down into 4 basic bodies: a physical body, emotional body, mental body, and spiritual body. And he said in terms of stages of life, the physical body develops from in the first 7 years, 7 to 14, we develop the emotional body and really learn to build relationships with people, interact and do that. 14 to 21, we enter the development of the mental body. And as that first starts developing, we generally think we know everything, especially we know more than our parents or anyone in authority that's trying to tell us something. And then the age 21 to 28 is the development of the spiritual body. And if those bodies have developed properly and there's no karmic influences that have distorted or caused them to be, I would say, dysfunctional in some way, or that, if you've been like abused during the first few years of life, or if you've been abandoned, those can really distort the pattern in the centers or the chakras. And we'll look at some of those and see some examples. And then there's a lot of discussion. And if you look on the internet today, there's, I always tell people we're in the age of the 10,000 gurus, and there's at least a few hundred different chakra maps that you can search on Google and get images of. And if you just take it as face value, a lot of times people take their drawing from their teacher, like the drawings that we had from Audley, or from their favorite teacher, and then they define the whole world in terms of that drawing. It's kind of a map in sense. And it's like, why are there different drawings and what accounts for the differences? And the thing I always like to emphasize is that drawings are two-dimensional representations that are like maps or useful illustrations for teaching about what you, consciousness, are. And it's often called the lower kingdom or the kingdom of man and woman. I'm going to share what I learned from Audley, but also a lot of the things that he taught me as I applied them and developed. This site opened in some of the centers, and so I began to see a world that had some of these components to it, and often what I saw was much different than the drawing. And so, I went through many years of thinking I must be, have some distortion in myself, or I must be looking incorrectly, or I didn't understand the drawing. And then I really looked much deeper into it. And then I began to see the energy flows or energetic flows in minerals, plants, and animals. And, and I ask people if I'm one-on-one with them, can they experience them? How do they experience them? I found some people see them. Some people feel the energy. A lot of body workers that do Reiki or different types of contact or non-contact, acupressure, acupuncture, all those things. They see it and are aware of it in a different way than I might be. And then there's a lot of times people want to know, are there past lives or karma? Is that visible in the chakras? Because sometimes you look at someone and you see maybe you recognize them from another time, or you see an image. And then there's questions. How do you correct or heal a broken heart? And this is an area where Audley was just an absolute master. I mean, he was a healer of the highest order in the spiritual energies, and he could fix sinners. He could mend a broken heart. If you ever had a place where you were all blown out because you got angry, or you got lost in some way, and you come to Audley and you could sit with him, and sometimes he would describe what he's doing. And sometimes he wouldn't. He would just work on you and hold you in a way that kind of put you back together, and you were good for a while. And if you went out and did the same thing and broke it in the same way, or you went back to that person that just broke your heart because you were lonely, and then it got broken again, maybe even more severely. After a few times, he would generally say, you've got some lessons to learn here. But I never saw him not help someone or turn someone away because they kept making mistakes. He wasn't that kind of teacher. Some that I have met, you don't follow the teaching once, and they say you're done, and they won't have anything to do with them anymore. And then there's a lot of traditions, different drawings and stuff, and we'll look at some of those. Again, perspective makes all the difference. Where you're looking from when you look at these things, or where you're learning from, and think of them in terms of maps. And when maps are made, it's a hard job for a map maker to know how much to put in the map. And usually the minimal amount, like if you're trying to give somebody directions to your house, you don't draw in, you draw a little map and sketch it out, and you may show, some of the major roads that they have to go down, some major landmarks, but you don't show every stop sign and every turn and every creek and every house on the road. And it's just like looking at Google Maps. You can click to satellite view and it shows you the trees and everything. A lot of that becomes confusing. And even when you turn that on in Google Maps, it still does a fine outline of where the roads are. So these drawings, and then the perspective, and especially I always like this little series, because you look in the sky to see the moon if you want to see the truth about it, not in the book. So what that really means is you don't base it so much on what you've read, but what you've experienced, and try to keep that focus and that balance, because it's so easy to get caught in, I've got this picture from Audley or from this teacher, and it's the true way and the only way, and if you don't agree with me, we can't be friends, or I'll just kill you since we can't come into agreement. But then if you get far enough out in space, you see the Earth and a different perspective. You see it in a whole different way. It becomes a blue marble floating in space. And then if you get to the moon and you look back, you see something like this. And so the perspective from where you look and how you perceive determines a great deal about what you perceive and how you perceive it. And then I went through this last time, but I think the thing I got most from Audley was validate the path of meditation. It's just like all this stuff is great. But if you can't validate it, if you just take it on, I believe it, the teacher said it, and it feels good, and that you won't develop mastery of those energy flows, of that knowledge, and you won't know if it's right or wrong. And you need to test the information, and not test it aggressively and angrily and all that, but test it and see if it's valid. And if it's in error, correct it. And I'm constantly finding things that are a little different, or I saw them somehow different, and I incorporate that into how I teach or how I share the information. And then I'm constantly trying to refine and improve the descriptions in the language, and use, make it as current as possible in the most current scientific, linguistic, and religious terms, to make it easy and clear, so that when you explain it to somebody, they say, oh, now I understand why I need to meditate. And you mean I need to meditate every day? Oh yeah, it works best if you build a habit in that. And we found that there's a lot of scientific work now that has even measured brain waves and done all that. And I'll do a lecture on that at some point, neurotheology, or how all of this relates and correlates directly to what we can measure about the body and how we can enhance it in some ways. And that'll really be for another time. Then I always try to make this as a base. There's 3 basic states of consciousness that most of us are aware of. The waking consciousness, this is the gross level, the physical level, the ego. The dream consciousness, subtle levels, mind in a subtle state. And then sleep, deep sleep, no dreams. This is more causal in nature, manifesting first forms and archetypes. And then if you develop awareness beyond that, in the pure awareness or the witness, the true God self, the Atman, the Turiya, or Turiyatita, the state, the true oneness, where everything arises from. And those are the different stages. But one thing that's important to point out is that all of us have these experiences all the time. You're born with them. When every baby goes through the waking, the dream, and the deep sleep, every day you experience these. And it's helpful to know what state you're in. And when we look at these drawings of the chakras or the centers of the kingdom, we'll try to keep this in mind, and I'll refer back to this from time to time. And then the stages of consciousness, I talked a little about that last time. And then what are you? And everybody, when they first become aware of this kind of information, or even after studying it many years, often people want to know about their past lives. I had a call yesterday, and people wanted to know what solar system they came from, or what galaxy. Some of them had been told by Audley that they came from the galaxy of Andromeda, and they had come to this world and worked with him. And he had made comments that some are from the Milky Way galaxy, the current galaxy that we're in, and most of their development had been there. And then he talks about different bodies. So we try to do that in the stages of life, and then the chakras. And we've got definition in terms of number of the petals, the sounds. And I've been capturing sound samples, but I just like Kevin's effort to play us the greeting. Yeah, I found sounds don't come through from sound clips as well on Zoom, and so I'm going to figure that out and make it so that we can actually give the samples of the kinds of sounds that people hear for the different chakras. And then the colors is one that I've seen people have the greatest difficulty about. Many of the drawings, and we'll look at several of them from different teachers, they show chakras with different color sequences. And some of them are usually red is always at the bottom, but when you get to the solar plexus and the heart, some of them are green, some of them are yellow, and they're flipped around, and they swear this is the true way. Well, what's all that about, and why is it one way or another, and are they fixed? And then can they be damaged? Can they be healed? And in some ways, they're doorways to other levels. And then we're back to that broken heart, and what can be done. I've got some little samples. The sheaths, won't go into that so much now, but the 7 planes of existence, this is another way to think of the chakras or the levels in the kingdom. And it's pure existence, the Sat, pure consciousness, the Chitta, the realm of bliss, Ananda, and the term in Sanskrit, Sat Chitananda, is often describes the whole thing, and that defines all the upper level. But the realm of intelligence, the realm of the mind, the high mind, intelligence or wisdom, the lower mind, it's the thinking principle, it's emotions, it's the lower mind is really an organ, just like your eyes and your ears are organs. It's an organ of sense perception, and the mind sees the thoughts. And when people sit down to meditate and they say, close your eyes and let your mind settle down, they'll see the dog running by that's barking. They'll see the traffic. They'll remember, oh, my mom beat me when the dog ran away. And they'll play these things in the mind. That's simply the mind seeing or perceiving the thoughts that you have. And then the realm of the vital force, the breath or the prana, and there's exercises to do these and make them more active. And then the material realm, the physical body, and often these are defined in terms of gross, the physical body. All the things in between are considered subtle because they're all aspects that can be seen in the dream state or in the psychic site. And then the causal is the highest state, and that's where anything that comes in that level, it's breathed out into existence. And so it's a picture. And this is Audley's picture of the Great Supreme or the Kingdom of God, the whole thing. We start in the upper, the big circle. That's meant to be a representation of what he called the Great Supreme, or the Supreme being the breath that comes out from that single point in the center. All of existence comes out. Each one of the golden rays that come out actually forms a small exact image or duplicate of the Great Supreme. And that's he talked about that as the soul or the oversoul. And then the Godhead, the giant ball of white light, and then the sensory experience, all of the bodies below. We'll go into more detail on those. And then he had a drawing that looked very much like this, and I've had because the one I have is pretty faded, and there's some copyright issues and all that. I've recently had a lot of these things just redone completely by another artist, and they'll all be put on a Facebook group and on a website, and they'll be open source. Anybody can use them for anything, but it gives you a picture of what we are. And this is the kingdom of man. It's the upper kingdom and the lower kingdom shown here, the physical body, and then from the top of the head up, the spiritual aspect or component of it. And for me, as I see these, like in this, it looks like the Godhead is maybe 2.5 or 3 feet above your head. When I look at that, it really isn't that way from my perception. It's all this right in the center of the head, and there is a component here that all of those shrink down into kind of a separate dimension or a multi-dimensional model. And a lot of the traditions have some type of headdress or feathers on the head or things to represent that right at the top of the head rather than up above it. And so the thing I try to understand is this is a way that it helps us to visualize. It's a map. It's trying to show us how these are incorporated into us. But there are some things that if you look at the drawings, and I did a lot of filtering on it to see it, but he talked about a second spinal system that's up above, and there's even like hip bones and stuff like that in there. And when all that, and they're all directly related to the energy fields. There's lines going from like the heart to the Buddha and things like that. All of those connect in a different way, but it's like showing a drawing that has a physical body in one dimension, the gross realm, and then the subtle bodies in the subtle realms in between, and they're all actually anchored to or incorporated in the physical body. But to try to explain that, you end up with a drawing that spreads them out, and maybe that's the way some people see it. It's just personally, I don't see it in that way so much. And then when we look at the lower part in particular, which is where I really wanted to focus stuff today, we have the causal center, the crown chakra at the top of the head, and then the subtle realms, and it's the chakras in between, and then procreation, that's the physical form, and that all of these subtle components have an aspect in each one of the centers. And each center, if you look at it, or chakra, like the root chakra, the heart chakra, since it's in the middle of the drawing, the golden one, in the way he represented it. And this, in most of the traditions from India, this is always represented as green. But each level, though, we have seven chakras, or seven levels that we talk about. Each one of them has this gross, subtle, and causal component to it. So really, there's 21 different versions of it if you look at them. And when I look at a person energetically, I will see kind of where they're activated. And some people will have a lot more consciousness in the subtle awareness and in the subtle energies, and those chakra colors will be slightly different than if they're very more physical in the gross form world. There'll be one color if that's where they're functioning in all the chakras, and it gets to be kind of complex. Some people are real strong in certain levels, and then very minimal or weak development in other levels, or damage in other levels that cause them to be restrictive in how they perceive, or it may be completely one of these petals on the chakra can, like often people describe as blowing out, or blowing out their emotions, or they're getting so angry and blowing out their life power, or getting the throat center so you get so mad, and then you spew sound out through that throat chakra. But if you have holes in that, you can really do things that are very hurtful to people. And if you have holes or damage in any of these chakras, it makes you hypersensitive to the influences around you. And so you really need to build shields. And Audley did a lot of teaching about how to build shields or coverings over the centers and the chakras, so that you could be more peaceful, so that you could protect yourself, so that you wouldn't get mad at certain people for certain things. And there's a lot of teaching that he gave there. And this is the kingdom that we're talking about now in these levels. And then a lot of the work that the Audley had access to some of these drawings. The Chakras, a book by C.W. Leadbeater, and he was associated with the Theosophical Society, and he and Annie Besant were probably the best psychics in that organization, and they did a lot of work in trying to document and draw very detailed drawings of the chakras and the centers, and there's a lot of good information and explanations in there. And you can see that in this is a summary of it, but in theirs, the heart chakra is not bright, shiny yellow. All of theirs tend to have a little more of an overtone of the red to it. And so, if you looked at that in terms of the gross, subtle, and causal bodies, some of it's drawn a little bit more from the gross component of it, or the physical component, because they're colored with more red in them. And then I always throw this in just as a kind of a breakpoint reminder for me. When you see difficult items, focus on those being kind and gentle, those being of service to others. Compliments of Mr. Rogers. Really good for these times. And then when another thing that came from Leadbeater's work, and Audley reflects a lot of this, these are just actual clips of drawings from the book, and he shows the alignment in the body. If the person is standing up, and when I reference some of the stuff being at the top of the head, the Buddha is often drawn in many cultures with that bump on the top of the head that's 2 or 3 inches, and when I see it, that actually composes the whole upper kingdom. But if you go into it, it looks as big as the physical body, and I was explaining this to one person, and they assured me it's like the TARDIS in Doctor Who. And the TARDIS is looks like a phone booth on the outside that you would see in Britain. But when you open the door and go in, it's a whole giant world. And it's showing that there's multidimensional components to it. So it's kind of interesting, but I like to do it, look at it. And then these, I'll just go through some of these, kind of quickly. But if you'll notice that often the number 12 is associated in the chakras, and as that shows up in different traditions, it's like the 12 tribes of Israel. There's some, even in the Native American indigenous people traditions, there's some that that do things like that. But they talk about being 1,000 petal lotus, and there's lots of them. People draw it and color it in lots of different ways. And the brow chakra, 96 petals, often portrayed like this. The throat chakra, it's 16 petals. The heart chakra, 12 petals again. And you can see areas of darkness and stuff like that. I see when people are upset, they'll have a little more darkness, and it'll be to one side, and sometimes it'll be hurt. Sometimes if they've been wounded, like through abandonment or trauma, like PTSD, rape, any of those things, it often damages the heart because it damages the perception that the person has of themselves. And they feel it. They can feel it in their heart as a broken heart. You know, it's hard to breathe. It's like it takes all of your energy to do anything. And then if we look at the same thing, this is something that I've seen where parts of the petals are missing completely. And I know when I worked with Audley, he showed me a lot of things about how this energy works, and the petal may be folded back in or missing completely, a hole in the chakra. Sometimes it's at different parts, but he was a master at being able to fix these, heal these, and he worked with me many times, and I watched him work with others, and he trained me a lot in some of those techniques. But I know when he worked on me personally, I was like a new person, you know, afterwards, and it could be unbelievable. And then another thing that I've seen is like, this is my crude effort to try to show that a petal can be wilted or it hurt in some way, a wound that comes to it. And in time, I've got some people working on these drawings more of the way I see them. We'll be able to represent this better. But if that happens in your heart or in any center in the body, if it's a gaping hole or like a petal is missing or folded back or folded under, different things, you become depressed, lethargic, you're losing energy energetically, or you're losing your subtle energy and your life force, and so you find it harder to do things. And sometimes you just want to, if it's the heart, people will become very depressed. They'll just want to stay in their own being and stay in bed, you know, not do anything, and it can be very hard. There are ways to heal it, and a lot of the meditation techniques, not the meditation techniques as much, that in what Audley taught, he taught different exercises that could balance and heal a lot of these, but I didn't see that most of those techniques affected chakras that had been severely damaged. They can balance and they can seal them so that there's not so much loss of energy, and they can really help. But it usually took his touch or a healer. And there's a lot of people out there that know how to do this stuff, and some do it like Audley did. His sight was so clear, he just went in and said, well, I'm going to blend with you and come in, and I'm going to work on this, and you know, and he'd do it, and you could feel maybe a heat in that center. You could hear sounds as he was like, in a sense, sewing them back together with light, and sometimes like cauterizing the dark areas. It's like losing too much energy. Just like if you're bleeding out, they can cauterize a vein, and it will stop the flow of blood. And he had techniques that he did like that, and was quite a master at it. And then the spleen chakra, the navel, root chakra, and he drew these. One of these is on the cover of the book. Another is a panel in the book. He often offset the heart and the spleen center off of the true straight spinal system. They were out to the side, and Audley moved the spleen over, but it did not see the heart. And so I got to thinking about this, and I looked at a lot of people, and I find that most people don't have centers that aren't directly aligned with their spine. And so you tend to see things more like this from Audley's drawing, that one from Leadbeater, but commonalities. And you also notice here, like Audley had the spleen actually drawn down a little lower and things like that, but just differences in how people see them. And the reason I like to make highlight these differences is that I don't want people to get totally lost in thinking that, they see one image and it's their favorite image, and they think this is the true way. This is the way everybody is. No, it's like from my perspective, chakras, energy fields, and our energetic component, it's as different as fingerprints with each person, or the face of each person, or the body shape of each person. There's a lot of things that affect the differences, and so it makes you different. And then there was some of these things that different aspects of how to draw the map more appropriately, and always remember, the map is not the territory. Drawing a map of something doesn't give you an exact replica of what it is, and may have more detail, less detail. Can be quite consuming. And then there's like simple drawings like this, also in Leadbeater, the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, the center flow, and then symbols that are used in our culture, like the caduceus and that. And then there's some good tables, and all of this information I'll make available in the slide format if you want. These are tables from different people, but this shows the name of the chakra, the position in terms of a physical correlation to the body, approximate position of which lumbar or which vertebrae in the spine, and then the sympathetic nervous system or plexus, the different names and the components there, and then the different aspects of it are subsidiary plexuses or other centers. And some people, when they define the chakras, they often talk the 7 basic chakras. There's quite a lot of work that does information that shows the chakras are energy centers throughout the body. There's a pretty general consensus that there's about 112 major chakras, that there's 14 minor, and some of those are drawn in different ways, and you can get related principles. You can get which organs in the body or which aspect of the body they're most associated with, and colors that can help. And like this table, it shows the throat is the violet, the blue, the entire body more of a rose color, the prana yellow in the heart, where some of them, look at that as green. And then there's a lot of stuff with the glands, and I won't go into that, different aspects of it. But it's good to have balance in living. In everything, then, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, for this is the essence of the law and the prophets. And so I like to throw some of those in. And then Audley drew this symbol, and many of us, like I have the medallion on now, that when you achieve certain levels within his teaching, they would allow you, or let you wear these. And there's quite a few people interested in these right now, and there's some of them being made by different people that have done it. But what he tried to show in this was this simple drawing contains all of the information for the kingdom of man and what you are. And if you understand the components of it, then you know what life is. And then found an interesting sketch here that talks about the sounds that you hear. Like when you start to meditate, often we have people put their finger in their ears, or just sit in a very quiet place, or put on headphones or earplugs. And when you meditate, because each one of the chakras or the centers, as the energy flows through it, it produces certain sounds that they're astral sounds or etheric sounds, but they're in different levels. And sometimes they're very loud, and other times they're very quiet. And that sounds like the bumble of a bee, or what I hear when I am at that root level is there's more of a sound like crickets at night in a field. A lot of, I call them nature sounds. And then you move up, and there's often flute. And I remember one time I tuned into that, and I couldn't even sleep because the flute was so loud. And everything I did, that's all I could do was hear it. And then a harp is heard in some, that when I've heard that, it's been just a very delicate, so subtle I could barely hear it. The first sounds I ever heard when I meditated with Audley was from the heart, and it was like fine tinkle bells or silver bells, just very high frequency, but very gentle and delicate. And it was just it was overwhelming to me. It was so beautiful. And then the throat chakra, often people will hear a roar, or there's a number of Tibetan chanting tapes that I have, and you hear like clanging metal, things like that. And many of the instruments, or the mantra and the chanting that's done in India and Tibet, a lot of the instruments have been made simply to duplicate the sounds, to help people. They're an aid to help people focus and go in deeper. And in the path of the holy Nam, or the sound current that all of us are tied to, that following that sound, he always said, follow the sound and go to the source. And as long as you can hear the sound, you can move into the center of the spinal system, and you can move up. And another thing that I was concerned about at one point, I'm always looking at silly details, but every effort is made when you sit to meditate to keep the spine straight and erect and do all that. And then I began to look at, just like in this drawing, the spine kind of does a couple of curves, and when it's natural, that's just the way we are as humans. And then the energy actually comes and curves out and goes out the third eye in one direct, and then the other one through the top of the head. And I thought, well, it's really hard for me to sit straight. I had a back injury when I was a young man, and as a result, I have scoliosis. So not only do I have the natural curve, but I have a curve to one side a little bit. And I thought, man, that must be the reason I'm so weird. My energy doesn't flow right. But I found that you can, through almost any effort in flowing and working with the energy, you can learn to meditate and go in. That's a drawing from Yukteswar. I think that one was in there. This is another interesting drawing. It shows the number of petals. And this one, you'll see, has 12 petals in the heart, but it's green. And the life power has the 10 petals, but it's yellow. The spleen there, or the lower chakra between the root and the life power, it's in line, directly in line. I typically see people more with this type of alignment than any other. I typically see more yellow in the heart than I do green. And and I don't know why so many are drawn with the green, but it's probably my filter because of the way I'm looking at it through my own gross, subtle, and causal activations within my own kingdom. And then there's some nice charts, and these are too much to read and go through. But if you're interested, I'll just send me a note, or send Connie, and I'll make the slides available. And then there's some other tables that show like number of petals, and you look at like the crown chakra, it's often called the 1,000-petal lotus, but some of the yogis swear it's 960 petals, and some 972, and then there's some that argue about, is the brow chakra 2 petals or 96 petals, and different things, and relates to color. And the heart chakra here, it says the current color is green, but traditional colors are smoky green or gray. So, okay. And then the glands, a little bit of which glands and organs are associated and correlated with them. And then even the earth elements, which ones are correlated with which chakra, and how that goes. And then this is an interesting table that I found in one text, and it actually gives the relationship to the vertebrae in the body, and the nervous system. If you've looked at a drawing from an acupuncture, you will see that the major meridians in the body, different counts and different placement, but it's accurate enough that if a person learns the body fairly well, they can put the needle in the right spot, and it can have quite an amazing effect on many conditions. And then this is another drawing that one of Audley's students did, and I have no idea who did this one. It was kind of a duplicate of Audley's original drawing. And I don't know if he did it or one of the students did, but I did note that it was somewhat enhanced in color since the old ones had faded and gone away. And let me see, I think those we'll just sort of skip through and then come to this final slide. Know thyself, know your soul, live in harmony with your life plan. And I always say, do what makes your soul happy. And that is pretty much the summary. And let me see if I can stop sharing and get back to Zoom.